Morning everybody, welcome to this week's devotional series. Last week we were looking at aspects of friendship and we ended the week talking about what real communication looked like. I thought we had kind of ended there, but a number of folk have been in contact with us saying, can we not talk a little bit more about what real communication means? So I'm delighted. I'd like to take that a step further for you today. Remember, our thesis on communication last week was just simply to say that you can have communication without relationship, but you cannot have relationship without communication. In fact, the depth of the relationship will probably be determined by the depth or the quality of your communication. There's a verse in Proverbs 27 verse 9 that says this: perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of one's friends springs forth earnest counsel. We understand so far the power of the tongue. This little muscle in our mouths determines so much about who we are, because we know it's out of the heart that we speak. So if you want to know what's on a person's heart, listen to what they're saying, because there's genuinely a very strong connection there. But the power of the tongue is according to James, used for good or for evil, and the choice is yours. You cannot ask God, say, God, help me to be kind, help me to speak kinder. God says, I can't answer that prayer, because that's something you have to actually do. We have prayers, we say, put a guard over my lips. God's saying, guard your own lips, because this is what self-control and you managing the power of your tongue is all about. Now, there is so much, as we look around the world today, we see so much relational damage that comes because people don't know how to control this little muscle in their mouths. We have silly little sayings like, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I have to tell you people, that's just not true. Names, calling, and tone of voice and bad things are going to hurt for a lot longer than sticks and stones. And so we're warned to be careful about what we use. Another aspect is our tone of voice. You know, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm told that the tone of voice says more about what you're saying than actually what you say. How you say something is more important, and reading from the other person's point of view, than in fact the words that you use. So we have a rule when we talk about conflict, and we teach this in our premarital counseling. Say what you need to say, but you need to say it in the kindest terms possible. When we speak with kindness to one another, it's amazing what we're able to speak about. The problem is that we use the wrong tone of voice. Now, it's interesting too that men and women seem to communicate somewhat differently. Men communicate head to head, and we try to share information with the person next door. Women communicate far more from heart to heart. Men communicate facts, women love to talk about feelings. Just go and sit in a coffee shop and eavesdrop on conversations that are taking place. Group of men will be talking about the rugby score, they'll be talking about business, they'll be talking about economy, they'll be talking about all sorts of factual things. It's head to head. Whereas women are talking about how they feel. How did you feel when this happened? And how do you feel about this and your kids and all of those kind of things? And so when you take two groups of people, and I know I'm generalizing, and you put them together, they've got to find some kind of common ground in order to be able to communicate effectively. So much relational breakdown happens when we act immaturely. Remember, we spoke about maturity the other day, and maturity, the root of maturity is selflessness. Selfish people are immature people, and you can tell the depth of somebody's ability to communicate by their very obvious maturity level. So much immaturity leads to relational breakdown. I sometimes think, we have people in conflict in marriages or relationships or friendships, and we often blame incompatibility. You can get divorced now on the basis of incompatibility. I'm not so sure incompatibility is what it's all about. I think immaturity is probably more what it is about. People want their own way. They want people to listen to them. They don't want to listen to the other person. And immaturity is far greater a danger in any relationship, ultimately in marriage itself, than even incompatibility is. Great communication happens like this: when people are prepared to meet one another where they are at. Now, I used to think, very sillily, that in order for good communication to happen, we needed to meet halfway. I'm not sure there is a halfway. I think when men meet women where they're at, it's 100%, and when women begin to meet men where they are at, we begin to see the depth of communication beginning to grow. Now, I've used this in the analogy of men and women. It could be in any relational issue, at work, in the family, and certainly in our homes. But when we meet one another where we're at, I think there's a biblical principle here. Jesus did not say to people, "I'll meet you halfway." Jesus came all the way from heaven to earth to communicate with us. In the Old Testament, we read about the law trying to say, "Well, I'll meet you halfway. If you guys could meet this law and fulfill the 10 Commandments and the law of Moses, then we can meet at a particular place called the temple." That didn't work. Our inability to meet that and to fulfill the law, Jesus said, "It looks like I'm going to have to come all the way." And he did. Came from heaven to earth, all the way, to meet us, to speak with us, and to communicate his love to us. I want to suggest to you folks that that's what good communication is about. For those of you who are battling in communication in some form of relationship, go all the way. Meet that person where that person is actually at. Get into their skin, get into their shoes, and you will begin to understand a whole lot more about what they're thinking and why they're responding the way that they are. When you try and meet halfway, it can end up being in a lot of trouble and terribly complicated. But only mature, selfless people are going to be able to do that. I think we also need to learn to listen with our eyes. We tend to think we just listen with our ears and speak with our mouths, and some have said that's why we have ears, 2 ears and only 1 mouth, so that we listen twice as much as we speak. But listening with our eyes, I think, is so important. It shows somebody respect. It shows that I'm with you. It shows that I'm concentrating and I'm listening, really listening to what you have to say. I remember when Candace was a little one, and Candace used to talk all the time. She still does, but I remember holding Candace in my arms, and she was jibber-jabbering away, and I was looking around, and she was jibber-jabbering. And eventually, in her frustration, she grabbed my face, and she turned my face towards her, and she said, "Daddy, listen with your eyes." Man, I wonder if there's some truth in that. We need to listen to one another, not just with our ears, but with our eyes as well. One last little thing on communication. I've noticed this, that when I communicate with God on a vertical level every day, it seems I don't understand it. I wish I could explain it, but the communication on a horizontal level seems to get that much better automatically. We fight with communicating horizontally. I'm suggesting to you today, people, that communicate with God vertically in your devotions in the morning, in your prayer time, in your constant going through the day, being conscious of his presence with you. When you communicate vertically with God well, watch what happens on the point of the horizontal. So as you go through today, remember these few points about communication. Get it right with God first before you try and get it right with human beings. Remember to meet people where they're at. Don't meet them halfway. Go right to where they are, and the depth of communication will be so much better. But let's all just grow up a little bit. Let's not think it's about compatibility. I think at the end of the day, it's about maturity. Hope you have a great day. Let's go save the world, people.